Hey there, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking money. So you've got your Kakenhi number, you have decided what type of grant you're going to be asking for, and kind of starting to figure out about how much you need to be able to pull off this excellent research project that you have decided to do. That's fantastic. It's good to start with the actual research and write all of that down, but the thing that seems to be taking the longest, at least for me, has been budget. There's a lot of little tricky things with budget. Remember, you don't want to come across as a shopping list for stuff that your school or institution won't provide, because the government looks poorly on that. So it needs to be concise, it needs to be well thought out, and it needs to not include things that you should be able to get from the school or the institution regularly. So there are two types of costs that come up with the Kakenhi, making the Kakenhi budget. It's the direct cost and the indirect cost. Now, the thing that is difficult to find on the web, it's only kind of hinted at, is where do the direct costs and indirect costs come from? So the direct cost is actually, that's your budget. That's the money that you end up getting for your project. The indirect cost is the money that the school gets to help you get the money and make sure that you're not misspending the money allocation and stuff like that. It helps them run their research department. And in some cases it's a research department, in other cases it's an actual research department. And so where does the indirect cost come from? And this is important because it matters how you budget what you're going to do. The indirect budget costs and the direct budget costs in total are what you ask for your budget. Now, you cannot have a line item in your budget that says indirect costs, because you can't. I'm not entirely sure why, because that would really help a lot. Because what's going to happen is you get your, let's go with the positive version, you get your grant, the government sends the school the money, and you end up with 70% of the money. The school gets to keep 30% of the grant that you asked for to be able to administer the other 70% of that money, and in some cases use it to help bolster their support for research at that institution. Now, that means that the school gets 30% cut straight off the top, which sounds horrible until you realize that in many other countries, like the US, depending on the school, most schools take half of the money that you ask for. So when you are writing your budget, you need to keep in mind that bit for the school. And so not necessarily bump up the costs, but keep that in mind as part of your costs when you're asking for equipment or when you're asking for travel, and when you're asking for consumables and things that you're going to need to be able to complete your project. You need to understand that you're not going to get 100% of what you ask for. You're going to get 70% of what is granted. Now, that's also kind of another point. They can grant you the research scholarship, the research grant, and adjust the figures to whatever they deem is appropriate. Now, generally, I don't think they adjust it so much so that you wouldn't be able to do the project. But in some cases, the project might be seriously cut back because you don't have the money to do all of the stuff that you wanted to do. So it's challenging, and when you write your budget, you need to keep that in mind. 30% of the total amount that you're going to ask for is going to go to your institution. So it is unethical to just bump everything up 30%, and Actually, it'll make it difficult for you to complete some to compete for some projects, because that will put you in a higher category that is more challenging and more competitive. But if you ask for $10,000 or hyakuman or not hyakuman, anyway, $10,000, we'll just stick with that. You ask for $10,000 and you really need all $10,000 of that to be able to complete that project, you're only going to get $7,000. So you need to at least be aware of that. And it's taken me several discussions with several people about where that indirect cost comes from and how much you can ask for the grant and how that is taken. And I never got a really good answer until I found some people who have had Kakenhi Grants before, and they showed me what they asked for, and then they showed me what they got, and then I looked it up on the Kaken site, and you can see who's been awarded in the past and how much they got and how much of that went to indirect costs and how much went to direct costs. And so they would ask for a grant for $10,000 and they would get the grant for $10,000. The school would take 3 and then they would be able to use the 7 towards their project. So it's not the end of the world, but it is something you definitely have to keep in mind and you have to pay attention to. So with that, that is today's segment on Kakenhi. 30%, it's coming out. And so make sure that you're aware of that, because otherwise it would be a very unpleasant surprise when the school tells you you're out of money and you haven't really even started your project yet. So, or you aren't going to be able to do this critical piece because you don't have enough money left in the budget. So with that happy thought, get to work. It is almost time to turn this stuff in. I'll talk to you later. Bye.